In Philadelphia, and time for the best show ever. Now, your starting lineup. Bringing the heat, Ricky Bottalico, Hunter, Brody, Scordo, and finally, your host, the Fanatic, Philadelphia.
Good afternoon, everybody. The best show ever here on 97.5 The Fanatic and NBC Sports Philadelphia. Phone number 610-632-0975. I hope everyone had a lovely weekend, had one better than a certain person we're about to talk about in just one second. But let's have the opening statements. Yes, and we start with the word of today. And the word of the day today is drought. For two reasons. One, I wish we would be able to talk about more today, and one that we're forced to talk about today. First things first, the Phillies did complete the 4-game sweep of the Nationals over the weekend. They've won 9 of their last 10 games, and they're now second in the wild card race. And as we talked about last week, surprise, surprise, Cardinals now winning the division and the Brewers falling down, and we believe they're going to fall down more. And they had 14 home runs, the most ever in a series for the franchise, and everything's great. But instead, we also have to talk about another drought, and that is one Pete Rose's Hall of Fame drought, because that one's going to keep going. His behavior yesterday was terrible. Peter has to do better. He's too old to be Pete. Peter, you have to do a better job. You have to conduct yourself better. We know the whole gambling situation with Pete Rose, and that already was there hanging over. But we also know that in 2017, there were a serious accusation in which a girl under the age of at the time was under the age of 16 claimed she was having a relationship with Pete Rose. Pete Rose had not 1, 2, or 3, but he had 5 years to prepare an answer, to answer the question if and when that came up. And when it comes up, he calls the female reporter babe. As if that's not enough, he then, when the AP asked him about it, he then talks about how it happened before the writer was born, so why does he care? And as Jen Scordo pointed out before the show, and you as well, Hunter, he was there because of the 1980 World Series. The reporters that were asking him the questions, that happened before they were born, too. So we're supposed to care about some things before we were born, but not other things, Peter? Come on, man. Like, the fact that he babed her. Then, after his team, that's the worst part, he has a team, told him to go apologize, he offered to, quote, sign 1,000 baseballs. I don't understand this guy. I said last week that he should get in, but please this weekend, be humble. And instead, he makes a fool of himself. And that's to say nothing of the fact he then goes on with the broadcast. And many people did a great job. Sarge Matthews did a great job. Boa always does a great job. J-Roll does a great job. But now poor Tom McCarthy has to sit there, and John Kruk, as this guy's cursing and using all kinds of words he's not supposed to. And then I take away from all of this is supposed to be poor Pete. I'm sorry. His behavior yesterday was terrible, and I'm going to say it right now. We're going to talk about it in a lot of different forms. I'm going to get to the gentleman, and we don't all have to agree. We didn't talk necessarily about what our actual take on this whole thing is. That drought needs to continue. I say no to Pete Rose being in the Hall of Fame right now. Why? Because they let people do speeches at the Hall of Fame. And after what you heard from that man yesterday, be honest with yourself for a second. Would you feel okay letting that guy around an open microphone to talk about his entire life? I can tell you I wouldn't feel very comfortable with it. I'm tired of this. He should do better. And this is a situation where Maxie over the weekend, he's 21 damn years old, and he's got a bunch of kids there, and he's more mature than 81-year-old Peter Rose. Get it together, man, before it's too late. I am tired of it. That drought should continue. I want to talk about this baseball team, but instead he decides to just overshadow everything with his foolishness. Hunter, what's wrong with this dude?
I wish I had the answer. It's embarrassment, and unfortunately, we do have to open the show with this, and we're not wrong to do it, right? Because it did overshadow the weekend, which was a sweep. The Phillies swept a 4-game series against the Nats. The Nats stink, but they did what they were supposed to do, and unfortunately, he runs his mouth. And we kind of joked around about it last week heading into the weekend about, okay, he has a chance, right? He has an opportunity to save himself a little bit, or at least put it back on the right tracks to get him into where he needs to go. And there were two ways to look at it. He would either he would be a professional and he'd handle it the right way and he would look at it properly. Or he'd be Pete Rose. And we said, well, what are we doing here? Of course he's going to be Pete Rose. And we were right. He was Pete Rose, and there's just no changing him. And it sucks because I want to focus on the baseball, but when it's as big as this and he's making remarks to female reporters in this city who do a damn good job, it overshadows what excellent baseball we saw.
I'm right there on the same page. I was over at the ballpark yesterday. Now, I didn't hear the remarks to the female reporter until, I guess, midway through the game. I probably may have picked up on it. But if you're Pete Rose, you're standing there waiting to get announced at Citizens Bank Park, and the boos start flying down. Then you get announced, and it's a complete turnaround. It was a standing ovation. Everybody was on his side at that point. Now, if I'm in his shoes, if I'm doing interviews after that, I'm making good on these interviews. He did not make good on anything he did here in Philadelphia. The league gave the Phillies permission to do this, okay? That was step number one that turned into a problem. Step number two is he opened his mouth. And, I mean, you're a guy that wants to be in the Hall of Fame and you want those accolades. Yeah, I don't see that happening now for a long period of time, and he could have made things 100 times better this weekend, and instead, they turn out 100 times worse.
You're absolutely right, Ricky, and it was an opportunity for him, and in a way, so many people in this city, I know, especially of a certain age, and this isn't disrespect, it's just, I didn't see Pete Rose play as a Phillies player. Because it was before my time. I'm aware of it. I know the history of it, but I can't connect to it because I wasn't at the vet. But there's people of a certain age, they really connect with Pete Rose. And him getting in the Hall of Fame would not just be a big deal for Pete. It's for all those people who love Pete. But every time we know about the gambling and all that kind of stuff, and we're at the point now, because of the amount of time that it has happened, that people are ready to forgive that. But the problem with Pete Rose is that, like you said, he's Pete Rose. And he keeps on doing other things to remind you that at the end of the day, he may be the best hitter. I mean, people say he's definitely a hit king. I mean, he hit a lot of singles. He did hit some doubles, but he wasn't a power hitter, blah, blah, blah. He may be the best hitter ever. But he also seems like one of the worst guys. I'm sorry.
You cannot keep piling up the garbage bags in the backyard and think they're just going to go away at some point. And that's what he's doing. He just keeps piling more garbage on top of garbage. How simple could it have been to have a statement, either by his reps or him, prepared for him, coming into this weekend series, and that would be all you say.
You nailed it.
Make it simplistic.
He's had 5 years.
And I got to tell you, being at the ballpark, I sat on my hands. I didn't know what to do. I'm not going to lie. I'm one of those guys who understands what he did in the game of baseball, but I understand what he's done after the fact.
Yep.
And during the fact when he was the manager, I kind of sat on my hands.
And I mean,
there were people doing standing ovations. There were people booing. I was so right in the middle that I didn't know what to do.
Here's what gets me, though. It's a controllable, right? He didn't have to go up there. Take away all the stuff off the field. You're sitting in a broadcast doing a baseball game. You know what you're not supposed to say and what you can say.
No doubt.
So that's like a whole nother level of you're doing that on purpose. All the little things outside of the huge things that we could get into, you're just adding on and making it worse. I think the trash is a perfect example of all this. Like, you're just adding more to the garbage of everything that surrounds Pete Rose. And this is where I have a problem. Because if we're looking at the Baseball Hall of Fame, he deserves to be in with the hits. It's not a morale Hall of Fame.
Well, so there is integrity involved.
Sure, there is. But that's where I'm uncomfortable because baseball-wise, there's no doubt I support him in. Human being-wise, he's a lot of things that I can't say on these airways, and he would probably say them.
I think everybody was, waiting to hear something. Maybe how about, sorry, I really made a big mistake back in 2017 or whatnot. Or
it came out in 2017.
It came out in 2017. And just apologize. Say, I'm working on it. I've been working on it ever since. That would have ended that whole thing.
everybody wants to forgive, especially an older Caucasian man. I'm saying that's a framework for a lot of forgiveness.
Let me ask you guys something. Do you feel like, okay, that kind of did it, this is never going to end?
Well, that's what I was just going to say.
That's how I feel.
Yes. You, Ricky, you wanted him to just come out and, quote, be honest and say, I apologize, or come bring it, starting out saying, okay, I'm working on this, blah, blah, blah. He's not. That's the point. He's not working on it. Yes. He was, I think, honest because he's not working on it.
Which I think
so
is
he couldn't have come out and said that.
Plain
Right.
sad. It's plain sad.
It just is, and it's so much to get to. But I do want to hear Greg in Lancaster. You're on 97.5 The Fanatic. He wants to talk about Pete Rose. What's going on, man?
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. This is very. The whole thing is very disturbing to me. It should have been a great weekend, and Pete Rose just destroyed it. I mean, what is he thinking? Like my wife said, he's asked a question about something that happened a while ago. I'm just here to celebrate the 1980 Phillies. How about that answer?
That would have been better. That would have been better.
That would have worked because then you could have just said, "Well, I'm not going to talk about what happened in the past. We're just here to talk about one thing from the past, and that's the 80 team, and that's it."
Hey, great, Pete. Thanks. Hey, thanks, and that would have been enough. I don't think there would have been a follow up.
Couldn't help him. He can't help himself. Isn't that what it comes down to?
Yeah.
But he's also he went up to the booth and started talking about playing ponies.
Yes.
I mean,
yes. He and then and the language that he used, he knows he's on TV. Back when he was a manager, he did TV interviews. He didn't use that language in 1988. Why does he think he can use it now?
Let me tell you something. I've seen Pete Rose play. I was a huge Pete Rose fan, and I always thought he should be in the Hall of Fame. Not anymore.
Wow.
I'm done with it. I'm done with it.
Weirdly, I almost look at what happened yesterday as a positive. I really do, because as Jen kind of alluded to, he's not working on anything. Mm-hmm. I think what would be brutal is if he put on this fake face and he put on this fake shtick and he went out there and lied to everybody just to maneuver and snake his way into a position, and then eventually something else happens again later down the line. Now we have to backtrack on what we thought would be a positive step in the right direction with him just lying. With this, it may still stick into the conversation like it is now in a negative light, but I don't want it to be fake. This is real. This is real. I'd rather discuss, unfortunately, the horrendous negative side of it than have to go through a scenario where we're dealing with this fake icon, if that makes sense.
Maybe he just doesn't care.
Well, he definitely doesn't.
I mean, to get into the Hall of Fame, maybe he just doesn't care anymore.
But he always cares about the bottom line. And last week I was trying to tell that WWE story that had been written in 2 different books and talked about the significance of that was already a decade since he had been banned from baseball for gambling. Mm-hmm. And then WrestleMania is near a casino, so rather he doesn't want to even wait to take the money and put it in the bank. He takes cash so he can immediately start to gamble. The question of the day is, should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame despite his many off-field transgressions? You can answer that at 610-771-9705. Brought to us by Dry Tech Waterproofing Solutions. And
what are your predictions on those numbers coming in?
I think that there'll be some vocal people who say he should be in. And I'm not even necessarily saying that they're wrong. The issue is, I don't feel comfortable allowing that guy around a microphone.
Boy, is it possible that if he ever does make it, the number one rule is you're not allowed to speak.
But that would be, I unfortunately think that there's going to be something worse. You mentioned before the show, Ricky.
Posthumously.
Yep. I think that's what happens.
Yeah.
And you know what? I can't even say unfortunately because Pete's doing it.
I don't think you want him up in Cooperstown and talking in front of, 20,000 people there, right, and then millions of people on TV. No, the answer is no.
And what if they try to dilute it? What we'll do is we'll put Bonds in or Clemens in at the same time. But the problem with that is eventually if Bonds gets on stage, you can say Bonds is a jerk, but you know what? Bonds has never been.
He'll know what to say.
Right. He also would talk about how he loves baseball and how his dad pushed him. There might be a story there where you might get a vulnerable Bonds. Even the fact that his book, he talked about how kind of a jerk his dad was to him, was a humanizing side of Barry Bonds, who's not a great guy. Clemens even too. We know his son. He cares about his kids, stuff like that. Pete, you hear about nothing positive ever with Pete Rose coming from him. It's either gambling, some young woman that's legal, or some young woman illegal.
I guess the best thing that could have happened is he said nothing.
That would have been.
I mean, in reality.
That's what he should have done.
Well, yeah, because you'd rather have the outrage of how come we didn't hear Pete compared to the alternative, which is this guy's a disaster and we got to get him off the broadcast. So if you're looking at it from a PR perspective, right, I mean, you got to think that less is more. And if people are going to complain we didn't hear from him, that's the best case scenario.
Pete, he was COVID negative, but he felt a little under the weather. I mean, he didn't feel comfortable talking.
Eating that milkshake yesterday kind of topped the list when I was watching that.
You didn't enjoy that?
No.
I mean, but I just want to say, hey, Sarge Matthews, if you're still in town,
Sarge.
I love Sarge Matthews. I thought he
was great.
I thought Sarge was great.
How about J-Ro, too?
J-Ro's fantastic.
They go right to a pros pro right after that, man.
Right after that.
They did do a lot well.
Right.
Let me put it that way.
Fantastic.
Wrong guy, wrong place, wrong time. That's for sure.
And I just say, for the rest of his life, unfortunately, I think there has to be a no microphone rule for Peter Rose.
But the problem is
no microphones.
You're probably right. But the problem is with your statement that they did a lot right. The most obvious one they got wrong.
I would never put him on.
I think that's a lesson learned. You have to. We don't know how long these guys are going to be around. Unfortunately, we just have to be honest. I think in 3 more years, 2025. I think you probably got to honor them again. He can't come back.
No.
Oh, no.
I think you have to do it. Maybe you do it in a different way. Maybe you have a bet. Because I do want to honor the greats while they're still here. I really believe in that.
What are you going to have him do a video and throw it up on the board?
No,
I doubt that, too.
We'll just show him going to home running hard.
Yeah,
Charlie Hustle, and it moved.
Charlie Hustle.
And it moved. Hustle, and it moved right on.
This time around, though, you had the people supporting him to return. When they do it again, because of this, you won't have that same level to fight through, which would make it easier if they weren't going to, have him back around.
And to think, say what you want about Allen Iverson. They thought he was a problem child. Every time he comes back, I love these modern players. I love the Sixers. I love Philadelphia. Okay, thanks, guys.
He won't turn his back like Dr. J did either.
Never. Those my little dudes, he says, every single time. It's just so different, the guys who you would think would be trouble. And you would think a man north of 80 should be safe. Yeah. He's north of 80.
Yeah, but I think Hunter's right in the sense that he's just never learned. You never figured it out. How hard could it be to figure out? You could go up there and say anything.
It means he's unwilling. That's what it means.
Anything other than what he did,
right.
Not only to Alex early in the day, but on TV. I mean, you know what? If you have bad things to say them in a dark room in private. That's it.
And I will say Tom McCarthy, I know he doesn't need me to have sympathy and care. I felt bad that a professional like that has to sit with that guy.
So did I.
I'm saying
I felt bad for Kruk.
I did too. I did too. It was Kruk too. But
guy went through cancer.
Yes, recently. He's walking with a cane currently. He threw out the first pitch the other day.
Brutal.
He's not doing well. And that's what those professional guys shouldn't have to deal with that amateur. And that guy shouldn't be an amateur. He's been around the game 90 years.
That is correct, but they dealt with 30 other amateurs yesterday, and there wasn't an issue.
That's true. You're absolutely right. Tony and Trenton, you're on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Thanks, guys, for having me on. You have a great new show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony.
I was 69 years old, and I was there the night they won the series, and I still say they never would have won it without him on that team. And everything was going great yesterday. The highlight film up on the board. Everything was going fine until he walked in that booth. And we didn't even know yet what he had done with that interview.
Yeah, because he had done that before he walked in the booth. Right. So it was going to go wrong. But it got worse when he walked in the booth.
Yeah. But he walked in that booth. Well, first of all, Larry Christensen was on. And he said that Pete was standing next to him, and he said, why isn't this place full? I guess he thought everyone was be there for him because, Pete Rose was coming back. So he must have had an attitude already. But T-Mac asked him, so what brings you up here? And he goes, they told me to be here. And I'm like, uh-oh, here we go. And, it all went downhill. He talks about Crucky. He's known him since he had 2, and I'm not even going to address it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And, right then they said, boy,
too bad we don't have the 7-second delay on, and you think maybe he'd catch up on that. No. Then he brings up Tony Perez and how high the pitch was that he hit for a home run.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, come on, get him off. And he just, and then like I said, they did the interview. He has turned in from being a hero to an 81-year-old guy sitting on the porch yelling at the kids in the neighborhood to stay off his lawn. It's just, it's a shame. And maybe this is the best way to say goodbye to him and just let him go do what he wants to do. But it's just, I mean, you look at him, he's not even the same, frame, the shell of a person that he was back then.
Right, but I tried to account for that saying, hey, an older guy not moving as well, that's fine. I just want to be around at 80. Fine. It wasn't even that, although I don't want to speculate. Maybe he had some help acting like an idiot. Maybe he did something that
would be a poor example, whoever would have done that.
I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, it was early in the day, but, it was
he's right, though.
It was 5 o'clock somewhere.
He's like
I'm just wondering, was he under a certain situation to where maybe he wasn't able to think 100%.
Possibly drinking or something like that.
I'm saying it was 5 o'clock somewhere. I'm just wondering, no one could be that dumb. So maybe he had a little help to act dumb.
Still not an excuse. Then don't do the interview. It's that simple.
I agree.
It's got to be so difficult, though, watching it, like growing up, and he's your idol, and then this is the version that you get towards the end. I'm trying to put myself, I'm a younger guy. I'm 27 years old, growing up. Simone Gagne, like all these people that I grew up with, the Flyers, Eric Lindros, this and that. It's got to be extremely difficult to see someone in this state after supporting them for so long.
At least I can say for those two guys, glorious guys.
Of course. I'm not putting them in that category at all.
No. I'm saying at least if you run into them, Eric Lindros is the most polite human being I've ever spoken to. Like, it's just amazing how some guys can come through. He was the chosen one. I'm saying he was the chosen and all that stuff. And right now you're going to talk to him, and he'll be, I'm so sorry. Let me give you a few more minutes. Like, he's the complete opposite guy. And this guy who's been given, the fact that they even allow these cutouts for him, like, they didn't have to do this. Like, he hasn't been around here since 89. They didn't have to do this. He doesn't realize that people are kind of doing this due to favor. It was he agreed to that lifetime ban. He agreed to that ban.
You're right. They were trying to make this a huge favor for him to show, look, this is what I could be. And instead, it was a complete backfire. I mean, you can't be any more disappointed with a person with the expectations that came into this weekend.
Right. It was about... maybe, in a way, okay, maybe there was a monetary reason on the Phillies end or whatever, but it also was supposed to be an opportunity for him, another opportunity for him, of many, 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 over decades, to rehabilitate himself enough for people to look at Pete and say, you know what, let's give this guy a chance.